Yeah, I mean, somebody asked me yesterday on Twitter, what's the biggest TAM available? And it's money.
Yeah, I saw your answer to that to Supermugatu, to Dan McMurtry.
Yeah,
My answer was energy. Um, I understand where you're coming from when you say money, because I do think the business of money is enormous. Um,
just that even energy is priced in money. I mean, it is the
yeah,
denominator of
in
everything
fact,
we have.
and what I was going to say is mine was a more tactical answer that, to me, is more obvious to disrupt. I think, like, the disruption of energy will have the most important impact in reallocating and reassessing geopolitical power. It actually solves most of the big, pernicious, corrosive issues that we have geopolitically.
Yeah, talk to me about that climate change and technology and solutions, because it's huge and it's been something it's difficult to talk about, or it has been difficult to talk about because you get wildly attacked for even talking about it. But it's clearly one of the biggest opportunities we've ever seen.
It really is. And this again speaks to, whenever people get really emotional about it, I just think they're a fucking moron. Like the left should just shut up and realize that, climate change is simply not a politicization of having breathable air, but it's just breathable air, and it's a non-political issue. And the right should shut the fuck up and realize that climate change is the simplest path to normalizing the geopolitical shit show we've been in for 20 years. Ever since 9/11, we've been literally and figuratively, but literally on a death march to destabilize the Middle East in this wag the dog scenario where, making it the centralized place where all the chaos in the world happens is our simplest path to safety and security domestically in the United States. But that hasn't turned out to be that way, because it's created all kinds of other whack-a-mole problems that we never anticipated. Now, knowing what they did, maybe that was the best solution. I don't know. I wasn't obviously in the bowels of that decision making. But in 2020, what I can tell you is, if you want to fix our problems with Russia, China, and the Middle East, the simplest thing is climate change. So why is that? Well, if you actually have the cost of wind and PV, batteries, etc., cheaper than the cost of fossil fuels, the simple economics, forget the value added of of clean air and a better earth and less deforestation, less destruction, less, all of that is good. But at a simple level, if the cost per gigawatt hour basically gets cheap enough, and it's cheaper than fossil fuels, you stop ripping the fossil fuels out of the ground. Now, where are the fossil fuels? They're in the Middle East and they're in Russia. Now, what do those two bodies of countries and country, what are they forced to do? They're forced to monetize all of that today, right? Because if they see a cost curve that's going down, 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 where at some point by 2030, the price of fossil fuels is basically effectively negative, their decision is, oh gosh, we need to monetize all of this oil right now. And now that has this other order effect, which is then the price of oil drops even further, right? We had this crazy contango event in May of 2020 where, you had negative, $30 or $50 per barrel oil. But the reality is that the Middle East will monetize their oil. Russia will monetize their oil. They'll pull all of those future profits into today's profits, and then they'll try to reallocate and diversify. Why is that an important thing? Well, it's an important thing because all of a sudden there isn't as much money left to have all kinds of excursions, to have all kinds of other kinds of things that could have mattered when you had a 50-year supply of $30 oil. Extremism all of a sudden becomes very unprofitable to fund. State-sponsored actions become very unprofitable to fund. You have to become, much more centrist, right? And you have to be focused on current stability of the population because the money's running out. So you have to be much more aggressive in educating your population, in making sure that they're well and they're healthy, that they're fed, and that they can then create an economic substrate that helps you transition away from oil. All of that is a massive thing that just consumes time and energy and focus. Nobody has time to be hacking and blowing things up and being extremist when you're focused on economic survival up and down the political spectrum. And so, climate change has this incredible feature that is it's a Trojan horse for normalization. Now, let me tell you something else. For the economic salvation of the Middle East, it's an incredible platform. Why? Because much like oil, the Middle East has this incredible distribution of sunlight that is just not true in other countries. Now, how does that play out? Well, when the price of PV and the price of solar becomes super, super, super cheap, and over time we figure out there's one massive thing in climate change. There's a set of big order issues, but one big order issue is how do you run a furnace at extremely high temperatures? Now, you may think, what the hell does that have to do with anything? It happens to do with everything. How do you refine oil? How do you make plastics? How do you manufacture steel? How do you do anything is with a high temp furnace. If you figure out how to capture the sunlight, which the Middle East is in an overwhelmingly better position to do, quite honestly, because they just get more sunlight than the rest of us. I think the country is, I think it's like Armenia that has the most sunlight of any country in the world. So theoretically, the richest country from a resource perspective is Armenia. Now, but go back to the Middle East. You have a ton of sunlight. There will be somebody somewhere that invents an arc furnace that can essentially be run with photovoltaics or wind or something. And all of a sudden, you know what the Middle East will be able to do? They will disrupt China. Why? Every single low-cost manufacturing capability will move there. Now, China already has a demographic death bomb that they're dealing with, which is that, in the next 100 years, they're going to have 500 million people in that country, right? Because that one China policy, one child policy has created such an overhang of older people versus younger people. They have this massive inverted demographic pyramid. It's the exact opposite of India, that you are on a death march to having half as many people. So if you have a combination of half as many people all getting older and a manufacturing substrate that's moving to a place that's lower cost because you have photovoltaics and rich, cheap, abundant energy, all of a sudden the Middle East becomes, a renaissance of GDP. And we know what GDP does. It normalizes everything. People want cars, they want clothes, they want to go to McDonald's, they want to have Starbucks.
We're kind of seeing it in Saudi now. They kind of get this, right?
They get it. Saudi Arabia gets it. They are at the leading edge of it. And so, I think what MBS is doing is actually really incredible because he realizes he has to monetize the oil and transition the economy. Once somebody comes to him and knocks on his door and says, I have a set of climate change solutions that can really, make you a manufacturing hotbed, of course he says yes. By the way, the other thing is, the Middle East was manufactured after World War II to divvy up oil so that the first world countries had access to a critical resource. But the Middle East has tens of countries really embedded within there's probably 50 countries in there. There's 30 plus dialects that could be 30 plus countries. So the reality is you're going to have a fragmentation in the Middle East, right? And you'll have a renaissance in manufacturing and GDP that basically makes extremism just inefficient and kind of not a good feature, right? It's a failed startup. It can't raise its Series B, right? Got out of the gate strong, raised the Series A, but no more product market fit, right? The market moved away from it. Think of Russia, same situation, except that Russia can't actually deploy, a manufacturing substrate necessarily as easily as the Middle East can. So if you look at climate change, you save the earth, you stop the extinction of all these species, you take carbon out of the atmosphere, and you basically create a soft landing for geopolitical normalization. Less war, less strife, less famine, less extremism. Wow.
I got involved in climate change Twitter by mistake once, and it was a pretty tough fight. And I actually just want to understand, okay, what was the behavioral motivation behind many people? And a lot of it was basically the same thing that you've talked about, is people are up to here right now, and they're thinking, my gas price is going to go up or my tax is going to go up. But actually, technology is deflationary, not inflationary.
One thing that people like you make popular, people like me make popular, is this idea of first principles thinking. I don't think that you can build a following anymore, at least in substantive areas like economics and Bitcoin or climate change, without at some level being a first principles thinker. And I think a lot of these people that spout off on Twitter or Facebook or wherever are just afraid. And I don't think they really take the time to understand. Like I said, they're more interested in burnishing their social media credentials. The problem is it's always fleeting because they'll get exposed for basically being a rube. And I think that there's a lot to be said for being thoughtful and first principles in your thinking. And this is why, again, I think the politicization of climate change is so stupid, because it's kind of like if you centralize what's happening, nobody can disagree that any of these things are bad. And so, guys like us will present it, and the extremism of all kinds, I think now are being exposed for being at the worst, simplest case, inefficient. It's an inefficient way to accomplish your goals, because you sound like a fucking crying, whining baby. And people are just tired of that shit. Just shut up, stop whining. Let's find a simple, reasonable solution for an important problem that we can all agree on, and let's move forward.
And what's amazing about finding solutions that involve massive change is there's massive wealth to be made and massive advantages. If you massively drop the price of fuel, everyone's going to benefit. Whoever comes up with some groundbreaking science and turns it into a product is going to become hugely wealthy. Great. Everybody's benefited.
I think that people get too wrapped up in wealth creation today. Again, it's become a popular sort of like distraction. And I think that there's like a secret hiding in plain sight. Yet again, like a good mental outlook, I think mental health is just about finding some of these secrets in hiding in plain sight and saying, okay, wow, okay, that's okay. Now, what is an example of that related to wealth? Very few people become wealthy by focusing on getting wealthy. And of all the rich people that I've met, they've always been focused on solving a problem. The byproduct is that the bigger the problem is that they solve, and the more powerful that the solution it is that they deliver, the more wealth that they create. But it's a complete accidental byproduct of problem solving. I tweeted this out a few weeks ago that solving climate change is what will create the world's first trillionaire. But the reason I said that is not because of the price of photovoltaics or the price per gigawatt hour of anything. But if you take this framework and apply it to climate change, what you're doing is you're actually bringing peace, right? Well, what is the economic value of peace? It's infinite. So even if you captured a few basis points of infinity, it's probably a few $1 billion. That's why the world's first trillionaire will be in climate change. And so, that person, I don't think is trying to be a trillionaire. I think that person is going to be obsessed with carbon capture or obsessed with, building an arc furnace. But the byproduct will be peace. And so the economic rewards will be in the trillions. And I'm okay with that. I don't think it'll be me, but I'm not jealous of that person. In fact, I'm hopeful that he or she is somewhere in the world right now, learning about this problem and will go off and do it.